Thank you for joining us on the Going Deeper podcast, a ministry of Fathom Church in Littleton, Colorado. You will never get to the bottom of the depths that are in Christ for you. And our hope with this podcast is that it will help you go deeper with God. So let's dive into this episode of the Going Deeper podcast. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is your host, Kyle Knight, and welcome to the Going Deeper podcast, a podcast where we have conversations, hopefully to help you go deeper in your relationship with God. I'm in the podcast studio with our missions and events minister, Karina Boss. Hello, Karina.
Hey.
And lead pastor, Chris Martin.
Hello, Chris. What's up, church?
Yo, what's up, church? How's everybody doing out there?
I'm freaking out, man.
Are you stressed about this? Are you a little stressed?
Well, yeah, I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it for this podcast.
I'm feeling a little stressed. As you could tell by the title of this episode, we're going to be talking about stress. How do we manage stress? Good ways of managing stress, bad ways of managing stress. Just hopefully some helpful things to you all if you are usually in stress or a stressful kind of person. But Chris, do you feel like you're kind of like always in stress? Are you a stressful person? Do you handle it well? You pretty good in stress or just not really?
I feel like I cope with stress pretty well. There are seasons when I haven't. There are seasons when I've done it better. I hope I'm not an initiator of stress too much, but I mean, that might be for you guys in your counseling offices with, paid professionals to say, my boss is stressing me out, but
all the time.
But I do think that, as a pastor, I talk with lots of people and man, this is on repeat. Mm-hmm. How you doing, man? Man, I'm just stressed right now. Just so stressed. Like I've just got a lot of stress at work, got a lot of stress at home. Man, my kids are stressing me out. Like I just don't know, I'm pulling out my hair. And I think this is something that I hear on repeat. And I want to, we recorded a podcast about anxiety specifically, I don't know, a number of months ago. And I want to designate this, like I think anxiety, clinical anxiety, depression, those sorts of things is one thing. What I want to talk about is just like, how do you deal with life? The normal, ordinary, I mean, that's all contextual, but how do you just deal with stresses of life, work, relationships, money, kids, church, all these sorts of things. How do you handle stress? Because my hunch is most people aren't doing it well. I think everybody would say I'm stressed at some level. But when we dig a little deeper and start to needle into like, man, how do you deal with your stress? Well, that's a whole nother conversation. So I thought it would just be helpful for us to talk about ways that we've experienced healthy stress management, maybe even confessing some of the times or ways that we haven't handled stress well and just kind of worked through some of that stuff. So Karina, tell me your answer then to that question for you is like, do you feel like you are pretty stressed? Do you feel like you're able to manage stress pretty well, or have you struggled with this? I mean, fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I am not usually stressed. But with that being said, like if you're like in the process of planning something and you're getting all the details together and you feel like your timeline gets crunched, I think that's when stress kind of comes up and you feel like this need to just steamroll everyone because you got to get this done.
Yeah.
And so there's that sense, but I think in my daily normal function of life, I have many, many struggles, but stress doesn't seem to be one of them.
Kyle, we all know that you are just a big bundle of stress.
I'm a ball of stress right now.
You just have, I mean, I've seen your office. You've got stress balls.
Yeah.
You're bouncing on those things. You got like rollers for your shoulders.
Working with the people I work with,
I tell you what.
I am always stressed out.
It must be a living heck.
It really is. No, I'm like, here's the deal. I feel like I would like to say I rarely get stressed. I think I do get stressed, but again, I internalize it and I just keep it to myself. And I'm like, oh, I'm just stressed. It's totally fine. And then that ends up being bad because then I'll take it out on my kids or my wife and just yelling at them or something and be like, oh, I'm just stressed. And nobody knew that I was stressed. But for the most part, I'm usually pretty good not being super stressed and kind of being able to prioritize things and take breaks from things and really like not get to that point where, man, everything is just piling on and I'm super stressed. And I think like part of that really is I feel like I have a easygoing personality that I'm like, I just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. And which is good and bad. So yeah, I'm kind of a little bit of a mix, but I don't see myself getting super stressed a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I affirm that in you. I
Hey,
affirm
thanks.
that in you. Let's talk about this. Why don't we start with, I'd like to get into other, like the positive ways to manage stress and maybe even sharing some of the ways that we manage stress. But I'd love to talk about maybe unhealthy ways that people deal with stress, just to kind of call some of those things out for what they are, even ways that our world encourages us to deal with stress. That maybe we would say that's less than wise and or that is ungodly. So what are some ways that you think people are tempted to or choose to manage their stress that you would say that's either unhealthy at best unhealthy, at worst ungodly?
I think then, naturally you want to just pretend the stress doesn't exist. And so you want to mask that with something. And it could be eating, it could be drinking, just zoning out, watching your TV, flipping through your phone endlessly, just kind of mind blank, just scrolling along on your feed for a while. I think those are all ways people want to kind of mask their stress or forget about it, disconnect. Well, feel like they're disconnecting, even though they're not really.
Yeah.
You said the word that I was going to say. Disconnecting, I think, is a huge thing. Especially in, like just in our times now, is when I feel like when we get stressed with, man, it's like real life things, whether it's job or family stuff or, man, health problems, like that kind of stuff that are like legitimate things to kind of stress out about, feel a little anxious about or whatever. I think a lot of people's solution is to try to disconnect in some way and be like, I just need to get away from it. And I feel like, and this is where sometimes I fall into it too, is what Karina kind of said was just kind of falling into sort of like whether it's like social media or TV or something, like just binging whatever it is, your phone, internet, movies, shows, or whatever like that, just to like in excess of trying to just get away from your stress and being like, oh yeah, this'll totally help me, just flipping through. And it is nonsense stuff. And I do feel like, and I'll be honest, like that's where I feel like that sometimes helps with my stress, even though it doesn't, to look at like flip through Twitter or something and look at stuff that literally doesn't matter. That is really dumb stuff. Cause I go, oh, if I just like that just kind of gets my brain off of reality and real stress stuff, even though it doesn't, it just sends me down a hole of like looking at nonsense for an hour. And then you're like, oh, cool. Wasted an hour.
So you guys just said a bunch of different things. And all of those things actually do take your mind off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like, eating like a big bowl of Bluebell, it'll help, right? It'll take your mind off of it. It doesn't help the waistline, but it'll help. Right? A couple, crack a couple of beers, that'll help. It'll help take your mind off of it. Watching something, watch a movie. You get lost in a movie or a show or scroll. So what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with just like getting your mind off of it? I mean, isn't that a good way to manage stress?
I think it's avoiding the heart of stress. It's not, it's a momentary distraction, but not a solution to your stress.
So it's not actually dealing with it. You said it's an avoidance of it. Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's dangerous because it's very temporary. It's very like it's kind of that whole, like, I just need that fix of like, I need to feel good for 30 minutes and watching a show or something like that. And then it's just, you're back to normal. You eat that whole Bluebell ice cream thing and you feel like crap afterwards. And then you're like, oh wait, the stress is still there. Like I'm still in it. That was like a good little distraction, but it's still there. So you're not really like addressing the actual stress and like good ways of maybe even like, sure, that helped a little bit, but better ways of giving you a little bit more relief in those stressful times, or something that you can go to that's actually beneficial to your brain or your body or whatever it is. So yeah, I just feel like those things are very temporary.
Okay. So I'm reflecting some of the things you guys are saying. Karina, you said that it's an avoidance of your stress. Kyle, you're saying the same thing. It's temporary, right? And I think that's really important to know about the maybe what we would say are unhealthy methods of stress, like dealing with one's stress. We'll say things like you guys have already mentioned. I just need to decompress. I just need to get my mind off of it. I just need to shut down for a little while. And we'll say those things, but all the while, all we're doing is we're not dealing with it. We're setting it off to the side, or we're blurring we're numbing our own senses to it for the moment. But when it comes back, it's still there. And here's where these things get really dangerous, is you begin to associate how you deal with stress with these other activities. So for example, if every time you get stressed out, you come home and you say, I need a beer, right? That's a prototype American sort of thing. Whoa, that was a long day. I need a beer. I need a cold one, Oh, so what you're beginning to do is associate every single time I feel stress, I'm going to drink alcohol, which in and of itself is a depressant. So that's less than ideal. But like I have a friend. We actually have a mutual friend who at one point he came over to my house and he said, I offered him a drink, like a beer or something like that. And he said, no, I've had a really hard day at work. And I was like, well, you can still have one. He said, I never drink alcohol when I'm in this state of mind because I don't want to associate the two. I think I was like, whoa, what? That was a very wise move on his part. So I just think that's where some of these avoidance coping tools can lead. They can lead to even addiction issues because you can become addicted to your screen as the only way to kind of quote decompress. The problem is the minute you turn that thing off, you're recompressed. So right. I think that's helpful to say there's some unhealthy things that all they do is mute out the noise for a little bit, but they don't actually deal with the stress. So then what would you propose? Like, what are better ways? What are healthier ways? Like, you're a Christian. You're stressed out of your mind because of work, because of a relationship, because of a neighbor who's driving you nuts, whatever it is, a kid who's struggling. What's your first step to start dealing with that stress?
I can think back to it, some of the stress in my life. And I think I kind of paused and asked myself why I was so stressed. And I think sometimes we kind of forget to think about why we're stressed. And through that conversation in my mind, I was kind of realizing it was more of a pride issue, that I was so concerned about people's opinion of me that I was pushing myself to extreme limits to make myself look more successful or to just have this image of myself that I had it all together. And so it was kind of a moment of like, oh, this is actually like a pride sin issue and I need to confess and I need to like spend time before the Lord in prayer and just recognizing like where my heart was actually at. And I know that's not every situation, but sometimes just why am I stressed? Just taking the time to process.
Yeah. Process and pray.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, let's not overlook that. Like, have you prayed about this?
That was literally top of my list.
Right. Like, I mean, that's, have you prayed about this? And if it's like, no, then it's like, then you haven't started dealing with it. Then you're not healthily dealing with it. Yeah.
Well, and it also makes me think of I think the first episode we ever did on this podcast, quiet times. It's just like, that's like my times of the greatest stress. It's like, man, when I could just get away and sit there, spend time with God and pray to him about my stress. And also it's like, that's the best. Cause like Karina's right. Like, you do a little bit of that, a little bit of talking with God about that and praying through all this stuff. Then you might get to the point and being like, you know what? I shouldn't be that stressed about this. Everything's good. Like God says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. It's like if I'm stressed, I want to give him all my stresses first and be like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. I want you like take them and then just like talking them through with him is like some of the best like that. I feel like that's what we should be doing, is going to him first with these things.
So this is fascinating. Thinking about the comparison between what we just talked about in terms of stress avoidant coping mechanisms and what we're just now talking about. Stress avoidant coping mechanisms are essentially don't look at your stress, look at something else. But what you guys are proposing is look at your stress. It's you're stressed out. Oh, you're stressed out.
Yeah.
Look at it. Ask the where did this come from? Why am I stressed? Questions. Pray about it. Reflect on it. Get by yourself and go to the Father with it. Like, so you're saying the best way to manage your stress is to
think about your stress more.
Think about it. So that's, hear me, that's backwards from how we intuitively think this should work, which means that's going to be hard, right? Because when you're stressed, all you want to do is avoid it. It's just like last week when we talked about conflict.
Oh, yeah.
When you want to avoid conflict at all costs, the same is true here with stress. It's just, I just got to mute it out. I just don't want to think about this anymore. I just don't want to think about this anymore. And actually, the only way to get through it is to actually think about it some more in the right way, in the healthier way.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then you pray, you journal, you think on it, you meditate, you take some time to work through it. But you still have that stress. That stress is still there. Okay. So are there ways then, healthy ways then, to not necessarily, I don't know that the word is distract, but are there methods that you have found that you think, this is a better way to deal with your stress, like maybe you're not going to fix the stress in that moment, but you've looked at it, you've processed on it, you've prayed on it, and then what?
I think we talked about a while ago, vivification, right? That you want to fill your life with the things that draw you closer to God. So whatever that looks like for you. I mean, even just going outside and walking in the fresh air in the sun for 10 minutes can do a lot just for your soul. And so finding those things that feed your soul.
Yeah. I mean, there's physiological stuff that you just mentioned. Walking, like getting your heart rate up, is actually good for stress, right? Being in the sun, getting some vitamin D is actually good to deal with stress. So yeah, there's some better ways than just like a Coors Light.
Yeah. For me, like healthy routine always helps. Like when I'm in stress, after I've, like gone to God with it, prayed about it, had some time with him about it, knowing that like, hey, the stress is still there. Like I'm still kind of thinking about this stuff, not doing something that's like mindless or something like that. But some routine for me helps, and healthy routine of like, and part of that is like, okay, I'm going to spend some intentional time with my kids and my family. Then it's like, man, I know a lot of people deal with stress, especially late at night or through the night and waking up and like staying up really late or whatever like that. I try to be like, okay, I'm going to go to bed at a certain time. I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to wake up early so I'm not super rushed. Cause then sometimes when I'm stressed in the morning, I'm like, I just want to like lay here for a little bit long, and then I'm stressed, and then I'm trying to get things ready super fast. So routine for me, and like a healthy routine can help me put my mind, not like away from, not like, oh, the stress doesn't, like, it's just not there. I'm just gonna put it at the back of my mind. It doesn't really exist, because it's still there, but it's kind of that vivification stuff, is doing stuff that I love to do, that is that brings me joy, that brings God joy, but also that is like, you know what, I need to get into a routine and just continue to do like good things, be around my family, and really stick to that, and not let the stress push things around and move things around and then just throw off everything.
So you, Karina, you said things that almost bring you delight or joy. Kyle, you said things that are good for you, right? Like, I think so sometimes those line up and sometimes they don't, right? Like, oh man, I just am really delighting in my workout. Well, maybe like, I just beat my body into submission. Yeah. Like some people like that more than others, but we would all agree that like exercise is good for you. Like eating well is good for you. Trying to get to bed at a reasonable time. Those things are good for you. Like there's not like a bunch of arguments out there. It's like, you should eat like crap, you know, like no, it doesn't happen a whole lot. So, but I do think that these are important things to just say, hey, you should know these things about yourself, the things that are good for you, good coping mechanisms. And actually the only way that you're going to practice these when you get stressed out is if you prepare for these before you get stressed out.
Yeah.
Right.
Discipline.
Like you're going to revert to Bluebell if you don't put a plan in place.
Yeah.
You're going to revert to unhealthy, you know, mindless coping mechanisms as opposed to intentionally bringing it to God, prayerfully looking at your stress, working through that, and then bringing alongside healthy coping mechanisms. For some people, being around people, right? Like isolation is a way that some people deal with stress. So when I was in college, I remember I used to get stressed out, and I was seeing a counselor at the time, and I was talking to her about all my stress. And I would just be like, oh yeah, I was so stressed out. And I went back from class and I took a nap. And then, you know, like I really want to date this girl, and just I'm stressed out about whether she likes me or not. And I took a nap, and my counselor kept saying, you realize you take a nap every time you get stressed?
That's awesome.
And I didn't realize it. Like I hadn't put it like, so what I did was I isolated and I shut my brain off. And I'm not saying a nap is inherently bad, but I was using disconnection as a way not to deal with it. And so sometimes for people, a way to handle stress is to sit with somebody, to be with a friend, to be with somebody who will lift your spirits, who will encourage you, go for a walk with a person, you know, those sorts of things. So, but here's what I think. I think our church and I think our world would do a lot better if we dealt with stress well, not on a surface level. It's not just as easy as downloading the Calm app and just going for it. It's not just as easy as like figuring out how you're going to survive till the next, you know, weekend on your job with whatever sort of, you know, cover over that they, you know, with food or drink or pleasure or, you know, entertainment, but to really say, hey, how am I going to healthily deal with my life, deal with my stress? And I think that's going to lead to healthier, happier, and more God-honoring lives for us. So
For sure.
I feel less stressed even just talking about this.
I do too. So that's why you're taking all the naps in your office all the time? Every time I walk by, he's always just napping.
Yes. Yeah. I just had a really hard meeting. I just had a really hard meeting with Kyle. And so
That's right.
I'm like
After
George
our
Costanza.
meetings,
I built out the underside of my desk to be a
go.
napping spot.
There you go. So
That's
now
I
know.
That's a
after
deep cut
every one of
Seinfeld
our-
reference for all of our friends who are listening.
Which is probably none of them. Just kidding. Any last little tidbits on stress? Well, thank you guys for talking about this. Church, if you're struggling with this, reach out to us. We'd love to help you through it, talk you through it. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.